Andre and welcome to 10,000 Pictures. Understanding and knowing how to manipulate light might be two of the most important and underrated aspects of photography. Most new photographers rely on assessing the available light and adapting their settings to match it. That is great if you want to take pictures of your pets playing on the yard or documenting your road trip with your friends. To take the next step in becoming a professional photographer, learning and understanding light is fundamental. Having a good knowledge of the subject is what separates a good photographer from a great one. The first thing we need to know is that light travels in straight lines, and when it hits the surface, it either bounces back, passes through, or gets absorbed by the obstacle. It is also important to keep in mind that every light casts a shadow. They can either be visible or invisible in the picture. Shadows are very useful in photography as they create volume and gives the image a three-dimensional appearance. We can also use them to set the mood of the photo and as part of the composition. When considering how to illuminate a subject or the best way to use the available light, we need to pay attention to 5 key factors: intensity, direction, color, contrast, and reflection. The intensity is not limited to the brightness of your light. Rather, it's how much light illuminates your subject. It is related to the distance of your subject from the source of light as well as the brightness of it. For example, a candlelight can be very bright if you're just a few inches away from it, but it's dim if it is on the other side of the room. The laws of brightness obey the inverse square law, which states that the intensity of light changes in inverse proportion to the square of the distance from the source. That means that every time you double the distance from the subject in relation to the light source, the intensity drops by 25%. The opposite happens when you bring the subject closer to the light. When you cut that distance in half, you are increasing the brightness by 4 times. That is important when identifying your camera settings. If you need more DOF or faster shutter speed, you must place the subject closer to the light or vice versa. We can also commonly refer to as diffusion. Once its level dictates how much light we can produce to bring contrast into effect. High contrast lights are known as hard lights. They're bright highlights with very distinctive shadows. On the other hand, soft lights produce longer transitions between the highlights and shadows, and that tones the contrast down. One easy way to observe the difference between hard lights and soft lights is to pay attention to the definition of the shadow. Diffuse shadows are a sign of soft lights, and hard-edged ones represent hard lights. The size of the light source is also an indicator. Small sources would always cast hard lights, and large sources produce soft lights. The size of the source is also relative. For example, the sun is so massive in size, but it's so far away from the earth that it appears small to us. Consequently, it behaves like a small source. A light bulb is a small source for us, but if you're lighting an insect, the bulb will be large in comparison. Therefore, it will illuminate the insect and produce soft tones. It is of equal importance to focus on the intensity of light as well as where it comes from. Depending on how you position your subject in relation to the light, the viewer's perception of the picture will change. Positioning your light directly in front of the subject will flatten the image, eliminating any shadows or texture. If you're shooting a portrait, the direct light and its intensity may cause your subject to squint. Moving the light source to the side will enhance the volume of the image, creating a shadow on the opposite side of the picture. Having the light on the side will accentuate the textures. So for portraits, keep in mind that using that setup will accentuate your model's points of expression. This can be unflattering if you're shooting an older model, for example. A softer light will ease those effects without eliminating them completely. Positioning the light so it's behind the subject creates a silhouette. This also eliminates all details and textures and accentuates the lit background. Having a backlight is very common when setting up for travel pictures and images where the subject features are not the primary focus. If you want to illuminate both the background and the subject, a second light source might be necessary. Depending on the color or material of the subject, we know that it can absorb, reflect, or refract light. When the surface is transparent like water or glass, for example, the light refracts. The refraction angle depends on the subject's material and the light ray's angle of incidence. When the subject is not transparent, we need to pay attention to the material and color of the surface. Depending on the color, light absorbs and reflects at a variety of levels. A red surface, for example, absorbs all colors and only reflects red light. The same happens for every color apart from black and white. White subjects do not absorb any light and entirely reflect brightness. On the other hand, black surfaces absorb all lights and reflect none. Glossy surfaces reflect light in a specular way, meaning that the angle of the incidental light is the same of the reflection. An example of specular reflective surface is water. When it's still, it replicates the properties of a mirror. Light that bounces off specular reflective surfaces comes from a single angle and therefore is considered hard light. Rough surfaces reflect light in different angles. That produces soft light. This happens because the uneven surface causes the incidental light to bounce in different directions. Understanding light reflection is particularly important when working on a studio, where reflections can be manipulated to fabricate the best light. Every light has its own color, and we use kelvins as a method of measurement. This provides context to why we call lights warm and cold. Warm lights contain a reddish tone, while cold lights appear to be bluish. For example, a candlelight flame has a measurement of 1200 kelvins and casts an orange light. We consider that a warm light. On cloudy days, the environment often appears to be quite blue, reaching a measurement of around 6000 kelvins. We consider this a cold light. To avoid making our pictures look too red or too blue, we can adjust the white balance setting on the camera. Usually, the automatic setting leaves us good results, but shooting in RAW instead of JPEG allows us to easily correct the color in post-production if the result is not satisfactory. The color of light also depends on that of the surface from which it reflects. For example, a red wall absorbs all colors and only reflects red. So placing a subject next to that wall allows us to receive red light. To reiterate, white surfaces reflect all colors and black ones absorb them. We can take advantage of this when creating unique color profiles for each picture. Photographers often add color gel to their flashes to manipulate the tone of the light. Understanding how light behaves is the first step when beginning to add flashlights to your setup. Nowadays we can use off-camera speedlight flashes with ease, which allow us to set up studio quality light without having to invest in expensive torches. Today's homework is to find fashion pictures and try to recognize the direction of the light as well as identify if it's hard or soft light. Please, do post your findings in the comments. They will help other photographers. This is a great way to practice and start recognizing popular setups. That's all for today, and I hope you guys enjoy. If you know someone that might be interested in this content, please share. See you next time, and 10,000 pictures.